All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Growth with Tacos. You got myself, Pierce, John Marco, and Rob Chen here.
Back in the
And
building.
how's
What's
everybody
good,
doing this week?
guys?
I am doing well, man. As I mentioned to you earlier before the show, I completed my coding assignment, and it was the first one where it was like, I don't know what I did to fix it, but it says it works now, so we're gonna go with it.
Hey, man.
So that was fun.
If it works, it works.
Yeah.
I never trust it when that happens. You ever?
I mean, I know I'm still gonna go back and make sure I understand what I did, but like at this point, I was trying to fix it so much that in the process of fixing, I also messed it up again. That I'm like, oh, and then it says that all 9 checks work. I'm like, okay, if you say so.
Hey, if it said that the checks are good, then all right, I'll trust it.
Yeah.
What's up?
Oh snap!
I don't have a lot of time, but I just want to hop in and show you this beauty.
Oh,
Ain't that one of the best sounds in the world?
I'm about to do some burritos.
Ooh,
Oh.
dude.
Even though I'm not there, I'm still thinking of you guys, and I still love you guys, and you're the best people in my life, okay?
Aw. Sick
All
invite,
right.
dude. Miss you.
Yeah.
Adios,
I got.
guys. Bye-bye.
Take care.
See you,
See,
Jason.
dude.
Man, that food looked so good.
Yeah, right.
Kind of blue balling us there. It's kind of messed up.
Seriously, it's the sizzling. It's the sounds for me. That's what.
Yeah, no, dude. There's no better sound to wake up to. It's like, I'm like,
It's like you can almost smell it at this
Yeah.
point. I was like, I could have felt like I could smell that nice aroma coming in.
At least I've got something.
yeah, I got water. It's just
Yeah.
as good. Underrated.
Water, fountain of life.
All right. So, rather than just asking, what do we want to talk about, things always flow. So I'm just going to start with the most recent controversial issue taking the internet by storm. Mr. Potatoehead.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So-
yes. Well, for those who don't know what's happening, do you mind telling people what it is about?
So that's the damnedest thing, all right? So right now, the internet is abuzz because people think that Mr. Potato Head is no longer a Mr. Potato Head. That Hasbro has decided to make Mr. Potato Head non-gendered.
Mm-hmm.
And that is wrong. So, no, I'm serious. So if this is a surprise to you, you have been misled by whatever media, news, Facebook, friends, whatever it is that you listen to, all right? Because whether it is that you support it and think that they're making a political statement for gender inclusivity, or whether you think that, oh, it's, more woke left infiltrating our children's toys, you're both wrong. All right? All that happened was that the brand name, Mr. Potato Head, has now been changed to Potatohead. That's it.
Okay.
It's like the Facebook turning into Facebook.
Yeah, this is the
Right.
first I hear of this.
It is absolutely nothing, but people are getting like riled up about it on either side, right?
They are.
And like
They are.
Mr. Potato Head is still going to be Mr. Potato Head. Mrs. Potato Head is still going to be Mrs. Potato Head. Like those two items are still being sold. They're still their thing.
So the
it's-
thing I didn't know is that Mr. Potato Head is just Potato Head. But what about Mrs. Potato Head? Is
No,
Mrs.
no.
Potato Head also Potato Head as well?
No, that's what I'm getting at. Mr. Potato Head is still Mr. Potato Head.
So there wasn't a new character
There
created.
really
They just
isn't.
renamed him.
Just the brand name. It used to be Mr. Potato Head, Mrs. Potato Head, or Mr.
Yeah.
Potato Head, Mr. Potato Head, or Mr. Potato Head, Potato Head Family.
Yeah.
All right. It used to be that the brand name was Mr. Potato Head. Now they just
okay.
shortened the brand name to Potato Head.
And what was their intention with redefining that? And seems to have been hijacked by other people, from what I'm understanding here.
So I want to say that their intention is just to be more modern, right? Like it doesn't even have to be a political statement. This is a children's toy.
Yeah.
And the point of the toy is where you can put arms for ears, right? If you played it at all like I did, or played with it at all like I did, the whole concept of like, oh, hey, this is a Mr. Potato Head was really just these are the parts that are going to come with it, all right? He's got
Yeah.
the mustaches, he's got the whatever, right? But we're talking about a potato. It is whatever you want it to be.
It's unisex. A potato.
Yeah, it's whatever you want it to be, honestly, right? And it always has been. And that's been like the point of the toy, right? So I actually remember when I first heard about it, the first headline I saw was Mr. Potato Head is becoming non-gendered. All right.
That's
And
what I
I
saw,
actually
too.
thought like that was stupid. All right. In my head, that was my immediate first reaction. I was like, seriously, they gotta like politicize Mr. Potato. What if I want Mr. Potato Head? Right?
Yeah.
Like it's already like a not gendered, really in essence, toy, right? So now you're just saying, oh, it's no longer gonna come with a mustache. What if I wanted the mustache, right? But
Okay.
that's not true at all, though.
Okay, yeah. I'm
just like-
reading more into it now, and I understand what you're saying here.
Right. So, but that's what people think happened, though. All right,
Yeah.
like the vast majority of people think that Mr. Potato Head effectively got killed or something, and is now just Potato Head, or decided to have an awakening, or you name it, right?
That's what I thought
Most
at first
people
too.
think, right, that there's like an actual change or attack on their childhood toy, when in actuality, Mr. Potato Head is still Mr. Potato Head.
It's just
the
a family name.
Here
Right.
is a direct
Brand
tweet.
name.
Here's a direct tweet from Hasbro. Hold that taut. Your main spud, Mr. Potato Head, isn't going anywhere. While it was announced today that the Potato Head brand name and logo are dropping the Mr., I am proud
I am proud.
to
Corporate
confirm that Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head aren't going anywhere and will remain as Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head. So there was, at the very basic level, a huge misunderstanding of what
100.
their rebranding was of the toy line.
So that's the thing. The original tweet from Hasbro saying, "Hey, we're changing the brand name to just Potato Head." All right, it has Mr. Potato Head in it, as in like the box has the words Mr. Potato Head on it.
Yeah.
So like, if you actually noticed the image, you would know Mr. Potato Head didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So this is gonna be one of my favorite examples of public manipulation and manufactured outrage for probably for years. Because everyone that is getting upset about this, or anyone that is even thinking like, yeah, go Hasbro for making a statement or whatever, right? You're both wrong.
This isn't a victory for either side's social fight.
Yeah, this is literally nothing.
This is a proper nothing burger.
Yeah. But people are getting upset. I mean, like, you know, nobody likes to think of their childhood, or everybody likes to have their childhood memories nostalgic, right? You know, so when you mess with that, it doesn't matter what it is, like you're going to get pushback. And the fact that you're doing that and then it could somehow be interpreted as being applied to like a political statement, like that was just a recipe for virality and disaster. And every news organization that covered it decided to be completely irresponsible and make you think that this was a bigger thing to push some sort of agenda.
So honestly, it doesn't seem like it is necessarily Hasbro's fault in terms of their marketing, but rather the news outlets that just ended up spinning it for whatever type of agenda they want.
Yeah, I don't blame Hasbro for this one bit.
Yeah.
Not one bit in this case. This is 100% entirely news media organizations going, all right, I know what headline will sell. And it's a headline that is so misleading that I say it's flat out inaccurate.
One could also say that a company as big as Hasbro could have had a PR department with at least some foreknowledge of the implications of what they were doing, even if it wasn't their intent whatsoever.
I mean, they did intend to like draw attention to it. You know, it wasn't just like a corporate change, right?
Yeah.
That being said, like it wasn't like a huge like Mr. Potato Head is still Mr. Potato Head. You know, it wasn't we are changing what Mr. Potato Head is.
Yeah, we're not undoing years of Toy Story, okay?
Yeah.
But I do think that regardless whether people have been confused by Mr. Potato Head just being Potato Head as like his gender or not, I think like it still worked in like Hasbro's favor. Like they are being talked about on the news. You know, people always say like, "Oh no, bad press is still good, like still press." So
like, that's usually how it works, right? So this is marketing.
That could have been an unspoken byproduct of what they were aiming for all we know. We don't know that.
It could be. Could have been, you know?
That's very interesting. I'm surprised I haven't heard about this until you mentioned it. I thought I was going to lead off with Dr. Seuss when you said, so on my radar today. And you said
So-
Mr. Potato Head. I'm just like, wait, what?
I just heard about Dr. Seuss earlier today, actually.
Yes,
The
as
dude's
far
been
as I'm
dead, right?
aware, that was news as of today. I haven't read too much into it, but from my service level, read it on the Twitterverse is like
I just know he's a racist.
they're unpublishing. They're no longer publishing certain select books of him because of
Yeah.
racial undertones. To put it simply, from my understanding, at least, I
Mm.
haven't looked deeply into it.
Racial imagery was the phrase used.
That's
Mhm.
that's the news that was happening recently with Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, so Dr. Seuss Enterprises, right? Because Dr. Seuss is dead.
Yeah.
So Dr. Seuss Enterprises, they have the publishing rights to all of Dr. Seuss's books. 6 of these books, Dr. Seuss Enterprises has decided to no longer publish, and their stated reason is for racist imagery.
Mm.
Now, I don't recall which or if any of those 6 that I've read. And I definitely didn't notice racist imagery as a kid because it's all absolutely wacky and wild. I don't think.
Like Cat in the
Well,
Hat. It's
I
the
don't know.
one thing too.
I would love to be educated on this one and be like, see it with an adult perspective and be like, yeah, that's racist. Or if it's just completely nothing. Which
So I
leaning
know
towards the
that
latter.
I don't know about the books specifically that they're not being sold or published anymore. But for me, I have thought that he was a racist for a few years at this point, without even knowing the books, just based on what I know from Asian American history. Because
Tell
during
me,
World,
I have no idea. Like the
Yeah.
only Dr. Seuss books I know are Green Eggs and Ham and the Places You'll Go. All right, those
yeah.
are the only Dr. Seuss books I can remember. So educate me.
Not Cat in the Hat.
I never saw it or read it. I kid you not. I never saw or read either of that.
It's okay. You're not missing out much. But
I mean,
with
like I know
the
the character, right?
in
But
terms, well, at least in terms of like the I don't know about the books, but in terms of racist implications, back during World War II, when the U.S. started to get involved after Pearl Harbor, Dr. Seuss was commissioned to write a lot of the propaganda. So he had actually a lot of like racist, like Orientalism types of propaganda that was spewed out. Like, oh, kick out all the Japanese people, kick out all the Oriental people out of the United States. So because
so these are political cartoons, I'm guessing, right?
yeah, so he created political cartoons and propaganda for the American people. So I know about that. So you could even Google that too, like Dr. Seuss.
I'm
like,
going to right now.
yeah. Yeah, and I'll say, and as an Asian American who grew up really enjoying that book, all the places that we could go, I was like, damn, I was like really disappointed because I was like, man, like for me, I was kind of offended. I was like, damn, this sucks, like to see that this dude who like published so many children's books that I enjoyed. I was like, dang, that kind of hurts, bro. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the times back then, but yeah, if you check it out, hey, Dr. Seuss racist, you could see.
I found one of the examples, so I guess I might as well pull it up on screen for people.
Yeah.
And we'll do it this way.
Let's see that. Yeah, that's the one that I have seen when I was taking
Chinese boy who eats with sticks. So I have no idea what the context is here, which I hate. I hate that I don't know the context.
I have no idea. So there's that one. There's another one that involved somebody.
So if you don't mind going back to that talk photo, here's a thought that I had. So a Chinese boy that eats with sticks. It is known that in general Asian cultures, eating with chopsticks is a cultural thing. So and I agree with Pierce, without context, it is difficult to state or not if there are racist undertones. Like I haven't read this book. I read as much Dr. Seuss as probably you have, Pierce. Like I don't remember any of them except for Green Eggs and Ham personally. But if this book talks about different, cultural norms of various groups of people, then is that racist?
Wait,
I mean, at face value, I have to say no. in
And
my
I would
opinion.
agree. Like, I'm a third Asian, so I guess I got some say in here. I would
Are you a
feel
third Asian, bro? That's dope, man.
like a third or a quarter or a half. I mean, around a
His last
third.
name is Hussein.
Yeah, there's that.
I'm trying to find the
um.
one. There is this other
So
one that
yeah,
I saw.
but the underlying point I would make there is that context is important,
Yes.
and I am not familiar enough with this story to comment much on it. But I'm not going to deny the fact that a lot of people these days are getting upset over the most microscopic things.
Mm-hmm. So that one, like that image, I'm okay with just because the context of it is like whatever. I haven't read that book either, but I also
Mhm.
wasn't referring to that book because I didn't know about that book specifically.
Right.
Yeah.
That's from one of the no longer published books of today.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So I haven't read the book, so I'm not that sure. But there was a political cartoon where I'm trying to find. Is there where I could like? Probably can't share it, but what the hell? All right. Well, it was like this. I believe it was a picture of uh, a Japanese person. I think.
You're trying to find it right now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess while Rob is looking for that, look, speaking on the topic, especially of Asian American race in America, I'm sure, especially Rob and a lot myself, like we feel a lot of the increase in Asian American racism happening publicly these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember having a discussion a long time ago when Trump was president, how I agree that calling it the Chinese virus was a bad thing. Like, a common counter argument I saw from the right is that he's trying to affirm the blame on the Chinese government for not handling this virus well and letting it out. I can understand that as an argumentative perspective, but right now, I mean, even back then, this pandemic is still a rage. It is not the time, first of all, to be blaming anyone. First of all, you have to get the situation under control, and second of all, Asian Americans have a particular place in not in general, of course, American history, but the way general Americans see races in general.
Yeah.
And I feel I'm on the side that calling it the Chinese virus, especially when you get your average American and you point them to anyone that is of Asian descent, be it Chinese, Korean, Japanese, they're going to group them all in the same umbrella.
Yep.
They're not going to acknowledge the fact that these are people with vastly different cultural and historical values that are important to them. And not being able to acknowledge that is a huge part of the problem against racism in general when you categorize people, of course. But they kind of see, I'm not, of course, I'm in no way saying there's racism is different levels and this could be a little more accepted. No, racism is racism. I think we all agree, of course. But the way Asians are treated in our society based on admittedly stereotypes doesn't allow for like the spotlight of, hey, this is a bad thing that we should be paying more attention to, be properly displayed to them, in my personal opinion.
Definitely.
And thankfully we've seen a lot of news, especially over the past few months. I'm sure maybe you saw Will on CNN. He's doing a lot of great work in New York and just bringing awareness to this. Like, if you don't talk about something, that is the first step into making it part of the conversation.
Definitely.
And when America, for the most part, there's a lot of people that tend to give Asians like, oh, they have some sort of privilege because they're not as different as other people. First of all, I think that's horrible. And I think that if you don't bring objectivity into the conversation, regardless of how one looks, that in itself is racist.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's worth talking about. What are your thoughts, Rob?
Man, this has been something it has been on my mind even before the pandemic has hit the States, because these attacks have already been happening for a while, but they've only amplified more because of the pandemic. So I've been one of the people who's also been very vocal about it, to tell people, hey, like, this is a situation that's been happening and it's not a joke. We should not be joking the fact that this guy calls it the China virus, and now for some reason this over 3,000 attacks against Asian Americans, and that's just in America alone. This is not even including like the UK, Canada, and Australia and other Western countries that are also blaming Asian people in general for this virus and for the whole pandemic. So it definitely has taken a hit for sure. This has already been happening for a while, and I remember even when I was first talking about this during the time of Black Lives Matter protests, when I was like in June, July, at those times where the protests were huge, like, and we were all participating as well. But in addition to supporting Black Lives Matter, I was also saying, hey guys, like, our people are being under attack. We got to speak up about this. I remember I had a friend who was saying that, and she was like half Asian too. And she said, right now it's not the time for us to talk about this. I was like, so when is the time? Like, our people are literally dying right now. Like, is there another time we could talk about this? You're gonna wait for us to get all wiped out first and get sent to internment camps again? I'm not trying to wait for that moment to happen. This is a
Yeah.
serious situation.
And that's something that we'd be surprised that a lot of people don't know about that happened during World War II. Like that is something that actually happened.
Like,
And as America was the victors, like history in a lot of ways is painted a certain brush, and we should not be denying the things that the country did do.
Yeah. And look, even outside from something that some people may think, oh wow, well that's so long ago, that's from World War II, you can't repeat something like that. Well, hey, look at 9/11, the same thing that happened. Once 9/11 hit and there was like another attack like on our own home turf, so many people end up blaming Indians and South Asians and Muslims for like all of these problems that were happening. They call them all terrorists and they start like beating them. So it's the same thing that we're seeing with the Asian American community now. And I'm glad that there's more news coverage about it. And the only way we're even able to get this news coverage after months and months and months of talking about it within our community is just the fact that we just kept mobilizing on the internet. If it wasn't for the internet, I don't even think like news would have cared, because it's not quote unquote a newsworthy story. If we want to bring back to Mr. Potatohead and what is considered trending and what is popular for these news media companies. So it sucks, man.
Do you have any stats for how much attacks against Asian Americans have increased? Because as a whole,
there's been over 800% increase since.
An 800%?
Yeah.
Since when?
Since the beginning of the pandemic.
Do you remember where you found that? I'm gonna look it up.
No, this is from like a month ago, so
yeah, sure.
Even more.
That's recent.
Increase. There is a couple of websites that actually have shown this. So, where is it?
So I know as a whole, like crime across the nation, regardless of race, is has definitely been increasing.
Definitely.
And I wonder, like, if you count for that bias, what is the disproportionate, amount that we're seeing? Because it's a logical thought, like we have historical precedent of similar circumstances happening. So like it's completely logical thought. I wonder how how real the problem is.
A comparative analysis would be important too, because we are in a situation where crime is increasing because of economic and health disparities across the country.
Right.
Let me see.
But yeah, it's quite unfortunate that your friend, the one that's South Asian, kind of said that, because like, hey, well, I mean, I wouldn't say like no one has a monopoly on like feeling like attacked here, but like, when things are bad for us, I'm still gonna look out for you anyways. Like we're all kind of on the same boat here. We're trying to build a better community for everyone.
Exactly. And that's the strangest thing is like, hate is hate no matter where you come from, no matter what it is. Like hate shouldn't be tolerated no matter what. And we shouldn't prioritize, oh, hey, this group's suffering is worse than this group suffering, so let's not focus on this group suffering, because if we're talking about liberation, as some people call it, for everybody, then you have to include everybody in the conversation. Right. You can't just be biased about that. But it has been crazy, and I worry. I worry about my parents every single day, and there are certain points last year where I would run scenarios in my head before I leave my apartment just to prepare myself in case I were to get jumped or stabbed or shot, like, or I would be called chink, gook, whatever, like China virus, like get out of my country, you're sick or whatever. So
Have
I
you
had
seen
to.
any of this firsthand
Hmm?
since? Have you seen any of this firsthand since last year?
I'm very lucky to have not personally have
Mhm.
experienced it, aside from in my neighborhood where my family lives in Brooklyn. In the neighborhood where we live in, it's close to Staten Island, which is pretty conservative and red over there. And in this area, there were it was like maybe May, around May time in 2020, there were signs that were being posted around certain streets that says, "Hey, everybody in this residence, we need to kick out all the Chinese people who live here because they're the ones who created this pandemic, and therefore all these businesses in our neighborhood are suffering." And so it was just chilling, like in in my neighborhood. I was like, "Whoa, what the hell's going on?" Like. And my parents walk outside every single day just to get some fresh air. They wear their masks. They're polite. They don't harm anybody. They just try to mind their own business. And I can only imagine, like, I'm like, yo, I see these signs up. Like, this is not cool. It's not cool. So that's probably as far as it goes personally. But there's also been other attacks where it has hit close to either where I grew up at or where some of my relatives would be at. For example, last year around uh, June, like early June, there was an incident where an 89-year-old Chinese woman was slapped in the face and then was burned or like attempted to get burned by just two random strangers for no reason in broad daylight around 3 to 4 p.m. Um, and so that happened in an area called Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, which is where I grew. I spent a good amount of my childhood there,
Mhm.
and it was also where my brother was going to EMT school. So in my mind, I could only think, dang, like that could have been my grandma, and if it wasn't my grandma, that could have been like my brother because he goes to school around that
It was
area.
still somebody.
Yeah.
It was somebody, man, and like my brother, he's just trying to save someone's life so he could be an EMT and do his thing. Like we're all here just trying to do something about that. And even at the beginning of the pandemic, my dad, he's a doctor and he's in the medical field. And even at the beginning of the pandemic, my my dad, my dad and I, we went and we actually established the first COVID testing sites in New York City. We were the first ones to be there. So we were risking our lives before we even have the information of what the true impact of COVID would be. We were there testing people, risking our lives, and he made it a point to bring in Asian volunteers because he was saying, look, like right now in our current situation, fellow Americans are looking at people that look like us and they think that they could blame us. We have to, and we shouldn't have to prove our worthiness, but in this situation, we should at least like prove that, hey, look, we are not the enemy. We're still able to help you. And I had to battle that too because I was like, as an American who was born here, I shouldn't need to feel like I have to prove my Americanness or to prove my citizenship as
Mhm.
someone who's born here. But I had to, in a way, I had to show up every day to be like, hey, how's it going? What's your name? I'm gonna sign you in here. You can see the doctor this way.
Yeah, that's a very interesting comparison you bring up because I remember the whole conversation last year about, Asian shouldn't have to prove that they're American to fit in, but at the same time, like it's not so much that you're proving you're American, it's proving that you're taking the higher path in general.
Yeah.
Like you're facing like fear adversity in its face and showing them no, we're still going to be the people that want to help other people out because that's who we are as human beings.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
crazy thing is that some of these people who are still blaming my people for the virus, like, yo, we're taking care of you guys at the hospital when you guys get COVID. Like the
Yeah,
fuck?
Asians represent disproportionately high number of our medical professionals in the country
Yeah.
for sure.
Especially,
Um,
for example, in California, where it's like a lot of Filipino nurses, for example, and they're being attacked and they're not even Chinese. You know, it's just wrong,
yeah,
man. So,
I
but
was in a long term relationship with a Hmong girl,
mm,
um, and you know that opened my eyes to how often she would get asked the question, "Where are you from?"
Mhm.
when I wouldn't be asked the question. Now, me, I would like interpret that as like saying like, "What's your hometown?" All right, that's
Yeah,
how I
yeah.
interpret the question. And whenever I ask that of someone else, that's how I meant the question. But I then she'd say like, "Oh yeah, I'm from Milwaukee." Right, and then someone would often like it was like a 50% chance.
The
All right,
classic
there would
follow up.
be
The classic
yeah,
follow up.
like one every other time that someone asked the question is the classic follow up. Okay, but I meant like, what kind of Asian are you?
Yeah, where are you
Phrased
really from?
right, yeah, like phrased in some sort of different way. Like maybe it was that upfront, maybe it was a little bit more polite, but
Yeah.
asking about their heritage or ethnicity or whatever. And I found that very, very interesting, right?
Mhm.
And it happened like enough that I noticed the pattern and can retell the story. But also it changed how one of the favorite questions I like to ask people is, where are they from? Right. So I've now changed that to when I ask Asian people to be like, what's your hometown? Because
I
oftentimes
love
they
that.
would
I love
answer
that.
like, oh, I'm Chinese. I'm like, that's cool, but I meant like, what state are you from? Like,
Like,
are you
That's not
from
the follow up.
Ohio? Or
That's not the follow up question you're supposed to ask.
Yeah. I mean, hey, like, to be fair, like we got so used to what that question really means. Hey Sue,
yeah,
we got so used to that type of question that we already assume that you're just really trying to ask us like what is our
right,
ethnicity
exactly.
at
So
that
I
point.
have to change how I ask the question now.
Yeah. But I like how you said it. Like, see, that's why, Pierce, you are a gentleman and a scholar, because you saw that and you were like, I actually mean this, where your
Yeah.
hometown is, because normally I'll just say, oh yeah, I'm from New York.
Right.
They're like, okay, well, are you like Japanese, Chinese? But then I usually just ask them if they ever ask me, oh hey, where you from? I always ask them the question where I ask, oh, are you asking where I'm from, like where I was born, or are you asking what my ethnicity is? Because they're different.
Mhm.
So I always try to educate them, because it's not like everybody's trying to intentionally just like be racist. Like, I don't think people are trying to be racist or anything like that. Some Asian Americans are offended heavily by this type of question. It's a
Mhm.
hot question for a lot of Asian Americans. So I always try to like de-escalate it for myself just by saying, "Hey, I just want to clarify. Do you mean where my heritage is from, or where I was born? Because they're
Right.
different." And they'll be, "Oh, I want to know like where your parents are from." They'll be, "Okay, cool. I'm Chinese. All right, cool." So then it solves everything. The worst part is when like it's someone who's Asian American's like, "What do you mean where I'm from?" And because if you start getting hostile
Yeah.
towards it, then it doesn't really solve anything either. If anything, that just makes you kind of a dick. But I
Right.
also can't blame Asian Americans for that, because it is trauma. It is also trauma. So
Yeah. And it's amazing to see how how the same questions affects different people.
mhm.
Because like growing up in South Florida, and I go to like anywhere else, like any of my Hispanic friends move elsewhere, like where are they from? When they say, "Oh, I'm from Miami," like Miami is interesting because it's so culturally diverse that kind of lends itself to be an acceptable answer to that question. And a
Mm.
typical follow up to that would be, "Oh no, but where's your family from?" And then we understand what they mean by that, like, "Oh yeah, I'm Peruvian, like I'm from Ecuador or whatever." Um, but yeah, this conversation actually reminds me of a funny video that I saw of the whole "Where are you from?" question when asked to Asian Americans, and I linked it to you guys in the messenger. But it's essentially this person on a run, and she's taking a break, and she's Asian American, and then this white guy jogs up next to her and takes a break too. It's like, "Oh," and there's a whole conversation, but then she flips it on him. It's like, "Oh, where are you from?" He's like, "Oh, I'm
Oh yeah,
from
yeah.
Santa Cruz." He's like, "No, no, where are you from?" He's like, "Oh, I'm from down that road." He's like, "No, no, where's your family from?" And it was an interesting exchange. I think, through comedy at least, it shows people
Definitely.
that, that kind of it educates people, simply put.
Definitely. I think honestly that is the biggest thing in terms of the job that this job cannot be done I don't think this job could really be done by necessarily like all types of Americans, but a lot of it has to come from Asian Americans ourselves to, number one, to be able to educate our own, but then also be able to educate other people about our history, because unfortunately there's not much history written about Asian Americans and the contributions that we have made. So I still get comments sometimes where it's like where I would talk about something that's happening amongst the Asian American community, like most recently there was like another man who was stabbed in New York City, and he, unfortunately, he passed away. He was trying to save like this gentleman from being robbed, and then he got killed for it. And I remember like posting a couple of things about Asian American hate crimes and certain people who have died from it. And I get this one comment from this random person that says Asians have just been on the sideline for so long while other people have been like bleeding during the civil rights movement. And I'm like, okay, this is a prime example of where education is, because most people have no idea about people like Grace Lee Boggs or Yuri Kochiyama, who have been really essential Asian American activists during the civil rights movements, but they're never mentioned in the history textbooks. And normally when we watch movies, television shows, dude, like sometimes we don't even speak. Like we're just standing on the sideline here. I'm an actor. I see this stuff happening all the time too. I'm like, yo, like that's where media and education really plays a role. And even as Asian Americans, we have to do a better job with educating ourselves. So many of like my own peers have no idea about certain incidents that happened. In my mind, I'm like, yo, I only learned about this guy named Vincent Chin in 2016 when I took an Asian American studies class in college. That only happened once a year. And that we didn't even have a real professor. She was this graduate student from a different university who stepped in to teach the class. So we don't have the resources for it. When our institutions aren't educating, they're not providing any type of lesson plan or education for us. We have to do our part to educate ourselves. Otherwise, we can't be the ones to tell other people, hey, this is what our own history. So there's a lot that has to change. But I'm glad that this conversation is being brought up, because now I think there's a little bit more emphasis of like, oh, wait, yeah, maybe we should include Asian Americans into the conversation of race, because so often, at least in the 20th century, race has so much been about black versus white. When nowadays it's so multifaceted. There's so many colors, so many spectrums in terms of race, ethnicity, culture, LGBTQ communities, marginalized communities, Jewish people, Muslim people. Everybody has a piece of this table that we all get to share. And it's time to include everybody in it, and not only hyper focus on one or two groups. Every group is important.
Yeah.
I do want to say that.
I agree with you. I think one of the biggest reasons why it's been like why Asian racism has effectively gotten the shitty end of the shit stick has been because, and by the shitty end of the shit stick, I mean like largely ignored as an issue, just for clarity. I think it's largely because Asian Americans actually are like our highest earners on average, right? And that's not to say that there aren't neighborhoods where if you're Asian, you're much more likely to be lower income or poor or whatever. But a lot of people interpret racial issues as racial issues when they're primarily actually like income or poverty issues.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have trouble differentiating the two because they are often like overlapping with your demographics, right? And with Asians, you'll still have those groups in a lot of the country, but nationally speaking, the demographic as far as income goes, it's not the same as for say African Americans.
It's still a very dangerous thought. So. It's a very dangerous mindset to have that, though, because the reason why I say this is because within the Asian American community, we have such a wide diaspora.
Oh yeah, it's massive.
And so even the statistic of on average is really tricky, because on average you're taking the most highest earning income plus the lowest high earning income, and you're kind of squeezing it into the middle, and you're generalizing it in that sense.
Right.
So that's why when people say, "Oh, hey, well, Asian Americans don't suffer as many problems because the average median income is higher," is kind of misleading for a lot of people. And there's articles written about that where it's, oh, hey, look, Asian Americans, they're doing well, model minority myth, whatever. They're higher earners, they go to better schools, they don't need affirmative action, whatever that may be. And I'm like, yo, like, I still see my aunties collecting cans on the street for like 5 cents a pop in Chinatown. I don't know what you're talking about. This is what I see. I'm looking at the Chinatown buildings where it's like 5-6 families crammed into one apartment that's supposed to be meant for a single.
Right.
That's what I see.
That was basically my point, actually.
Yeah.
Because like on those averages, they're real, but just like there are struggling people of Asian descent, there's also struggling people of white descent, and then there's struggling people 100%. Of every other descent, right?
Yeah.
And the average of someone doing well, whether that person is white or Asian or any other race, doesn't negate the existence of other people that are also struggling for
Yeah.
sure.
That's why I always have a problem with just like averages, like in general, even outside of like race, just like numbers in general. Like, I'm like, the average is so skewed. Like even when I'm talking about like even in academia sense, the average person that scored this test, I'm like, damn it.
So Yale University, I think it was Yale, had a lawsuit by a group of Asian Americans.
Might have been Harvard. It was Harvard.
Or it was Harvard. Okay,
Yeah,
see,
because they cap
better.
Asian Americans at there's Asian people at 20%.
Right. Yeah, they're like, as far as I'm aware, was like a clear-cut case of discrimination based on race.
Yeah.
And I guess the lawsuit just got thrown out, I think a week or two ago by the Biden administration. It was.
I mean,
yeah.
Fuck Harvard. Anyways, fuck Harvard. Y'all can suck a big fat yellow dick. All I can say, we don't need you. We don't need your prestige. I could get my education wherever I want, and if anything, I got YouTube now, so you can suck a dick. I don't want to pay all that money for you.
All right.
Sorry to get vulgar.
Honestly, Rob, it's refreshing. All right. But yeah, like, it's if that was against Black people, I would say that that would be a headline story, right?
Yes,
because that's the flavor of outrage that the media likes to stoke recently, and it also wouldn't be fitting like just our more commonly accepted standard of what is acceptable levels of prejudice, because everybody basically has some level of prejudice in their lives, right? It's just basic pattern recognition that we all form in our lives, and it doesn't inherently have to be a bad thing as well. It's what those prejudices are, how they're formed, how they're portrayed to you, and whether you perpetuate them and what you do based on them, right? But like noticing a prejudice or having a certain prejudice itself, it is not automatically a bad thing, right? There's a stereotype of hardworking Mexican, right? I don't know if you're familiar with it, right? But out in California, there's like a strong stereotype that if you're like an illegal immigrant out in front of Home Depot, like he's gonna bust his ass off to build your deck or whatever it is, right? Like that is a stereotype. Now, ignoring the whole construct that put this situation into place, my point is that this is a positive stereotype, that you have confidence that that dude is gonna absolutely like work his ass off for you, right? You have a positive opinion of that person as being a hard worker, even though you've never met him before, right? So they don't always have to be bad. It's just, of course, we like to pay attention to the bad stuff, and they often are, and then what we do about it tends to be even worse.
But
right?
sometimes, but how I see is like, no matter what, like stereotypes are still stereotypes, and even the positive stereotypes.
Yeah.
I know wonderfully, for Asians, for example, is, oh, hey, Asians are good at math, or Asians are really smart. And that's always really tricky because it then puts a lot of pressure too.
Yeah.
That, Asian people have to live up to. And that was something that was so hard for me growing up, because I'm like, fuck. I'm like, I can't live up to this, man. It's like, no matter how hard I try, it's like I just couldn't. And at a certain point, there's also certain Asian people, including myself, where I end up retaliating against that positive stereotype, and I end up being that kid who actually knows the answer to the math question, but I just sit at the back, slouched in the back of the class, and I sleep. I could have been the A student, but then I settled with a B, just to defy something. Was that good in the long run? Probably not. But it was a positive stereotype, right? Hey, no, there's nothing wrong. Asians are polite. Asians are quiet. They're chilling. They just mind their own business. That's a positive stereotype, right? But then the other side is like, okay, well, then they're easy targets.
Yeah,
an easy target for attacks. That's why so many of our elders are getting attacked. They're getting stabbed. They're getting pushed down on the streets. They're dying. And that's why right now I hate the fact. I like it and I hate it at the fact that we now have entire volunteer groups dedicated to chaperone our elderly folks, just to walk them around the street so they don't get hurt. You know, like it's like I don't want to get to that point where we have to do that, and it is. Like, so even if it is a positive stereotype, oh hey, you know, like we're gentle, we're nice. It's like, man, then you're just gonna fuck us over again, and you know that we ain't gonna say shit. You know that we're gonna be quiet. You know that we're gonna be submissive. You know that we ain't gonna say shit. So you know what? Fuck all you guys. All right, fine. If that's how you want it, we're gonna do it our way then. We're gonna mobilize. We're gonna buy guns. We're gonna say fuck you guys. We're gonna arm ourselves. We're gonna do it Black Panther style, except this is Golden Tigers. You know. So if they keep trying to push us this way, I'm not trying to say I'm not trying to radicalize Asian people or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I hope everybody who's watching it, I'm not for violence, but I am for self-preservation. So if that's what people are throwing at us, then I have no choice but to defend my people. So that's why
I'm
it's
super
like,
glad that you brought up that example, by the way, of how positive stereotypes can still be misconstrued, man.
yeah, you know, it could
Or
still,
I
you
said
know,
misconstrued. I meant misused. My bad.
yeah. Even if it's not meant for, even if there's no facetious like
Right.
intention, you know, like it could 100% be coming from a very nice place, you know, but
yeah, like you said, even the pressure, right?
yeah, the
Sometimes
pressure,
feel-
you know,
yeah.
that's why there's kids committing suicide, you know, kids who are 11, 12 years old committing suicide, you know. That's why there's kids who try to live up to this stereotype of like, you know, I have to do it, you know, I gotta do something, you know. Shit, man, I Crazy Rich Asians. It's a movie about crazy rich Asians, and now people just think we all got money, you know. Now everyone's trying to rob us because they think we all got cash and shit,
Yeah.
you know. And one of my favorites, that Asians are East Asians, you know, and that Asians do not mean Indians or South Asians or Southeast Asians. Oh, that's a different type. I don't know what the hell that is, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But very much so. It's like, hey, killer cam, GPS.
I think this, I guess, will be a little bit of a controversial statement to make, because I know for political purposes, South Asians and East Asians and Pacific Islanders have decided to band together to look out for each other's self-interests. But I would actually I think it's largely a modern day failing of the English language to be saying, oh, hey, Asians don't count that, or they do count that, because fundamentally, like, the back culture between, say, South Asia and then East Asia is very, very, very different. Like, South Asia alone has enough cultural diversity to like match Europe.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I would say, like, honestly, pretty much almost the same for East Asia, right? Like, there's.
I mean, you were in Korea too.
Yeah,
You were
I
in
know a
Asia.
thing or two about East Asia.
No?
You know, there's intense diversity within East Asia as well. But I would say, like, fundamentally, there's a lot of differences between East Asia and South Asia. So when someone says, "Oh, Asian," in English, they're usually like conceptually or mentalizing it as East Asian, right?
Yes.
And then I'm a fan that the term South Asian is starting to grow, personally. Because honestly, like, because I've always hated the term Indian, because one, like, okay, what about like all the other countries and areas around there in South
around
Asia?
that area, exactly.
And then two, of course, the obvious one, like, okay, so do you mean Native American or like Indian? Like, it's always just an extra hurdle. So I'm a fan that South Asian is starting to
I think
more
properly, you know, of course, Native Americans are, in my opinion, the proper term to use. And then, you know, Indians, I can understand the whole umbrella problem, because you're talking about over 1 billion people. Sure, that's one of the bigger people in the area, but there's a lot of cultural diversity out there. And, you know, it's just looping back to just a need for better education, make people better, well-informed.
Yeah.
And tying it back,
especially in the census.
Yeah, and then tying it back to the issues of race disparity, like, you know, that's why of the many policies I appreciated about Andrew's candidacy is the exchange program he talked about, where, like, you know, I think it was like a semester in high school, you travel around to the other country. Like, you know, if you're in an urban area in your life, go to a suburban area and vice versa, and your role will get absolutely flipped upside down in terms of perspective. Because there's enough diversity in a lot of ways within our own borders that people can really expand their worldviews. Like, we should be
So-
fortunate in a lot of ways that America is its own melting pot.
I'm so glad you brought that up because we call ourselves the United States of America, yet there's so many different pockets and worlds that people don't even ever travel to. People from metropolitan areas, so many of them have never visited the rural areas. And then there's people who grew up in rural small towns and they've stayed there for generations. So having that cultural exchange is so important, like within our own country. I can only imagine like outside of other countries.
Yeah,
too.
that's why I told people like my time in Iowa, even the month there, was just one of the most grateful experiences I had within the United States because I grew up
Same.
I was in a big city my entire life, and like Pierce was there with me when we were talking to small businesses, and I think I may have told this story before, but those moments in movies where someone's from out of town and they walk into the local bar and like the record player scratches stops and everyone turns to look at them. I shit you not, everything but the music stopping happened when me and Pierce walked into a bar one day talking to small businesses, and I'm like, all right, it's gonna be like that. All right, who am I buying a drink for? And stop a conversation here.
I love that.
No, nobody messed with us though. Just for clarity,
Yeah.
The bartender was perfectly polite, more than willing to talk. Actually, was also the owner. So it was a good time.
I just want to bring up
where am I located? I currently live in Rochester, New York. I don't consider myself from Rochester, New York. That is where I currently live now. So.
Also, I want to answer something that Sue mentioned a little bit earlier. Is like, I would like to get your thoughts. What is the best solution to stop anti-Asian sentiments? Great question, Sue. And there's a couple of really amazing organizations that you could start like looking into right now to take action. So one is called Stop AAPI Hate. And this is an organization where people can report. I want to see if there's a way that we could like share this in our live. Stop AAPI Hate. They specifically work on reporting. And what is nice about this website is that they have it in many different Asian languages, because a lot of these attacks that are happening, they're happening to people who can't even speak English that well. So they don't even want to report about these incidences. They've also never dealt with the police before. In fact, a lot of immigrants, and Asian immigrants included, are afraid of the police. They want to have nothing to do with the police. So a website like this is so important in terms of reporting and getting the numbers, the exact numbers down. We already have over 3,000 hate crimes. It's already increased by over 800%. So this website is fantastic because they have it in Chinese, Korean, Tagalog, Japanese, and a lot of different languages. So that one is great. And in terms of other groups and organizations that you can donate to, because I know you're not in the United States right now, Compassion in Oakland is another great one. So what they do is that they are a volunteer-run organization out in Oakland, and there's a lot of attacks in Oakland right now. So group of kids, they will chaperone an elderly and just help them walk down the streets of Chinatown and help them out. So I would say that's another really, really great website to check out. So at least that's on the West Coast. And then on the East Coast, we have an equivalent of that just started. Is relatively new, but we're getting a little bit more momentum. Is a group called Protect Chinatown. So they do the same thing where they get volunteers to help chaperone. So I actually just signed up to be a volunteer as well for Protect Chinatown, and this is a New York organization. So these are a couple of different websites that you could help directly. And the final one is a GoFundMe. It's like a Stop API Hate. There's where is it? Yeah, Stop Asian Hate. And so they're raising money to spread awareness, to be able to get the funds, and also to create where is it? Stop API Hate. There we go. Found it. Here we go. Give me 1 second. Putting on the chat. Bada bing, bada boom. So that's another one in terms of like donations, because there's a lot of different organizations that you could check out. But I'll say like these 3 to 4 organizations, in my opinion, they're great to look into. So yes, I would say that in terms of direct action that you can take. Now, obviously, this is not going to change overnight. It's not going to change even within a few months. It's going to be a long-term thing. So I told you the immediate steps of what you can do right now. Now, what are the long-term things that we can do to stop anti-Asian sentiments? One, keep talking about it. Talk about it with your friends, share it on social media, get people who are not Asian to have a conversation about this. Like, that's another thing that I love about Growth with Tacos is that all of us come from such different backgrounds, but we're all here because we love humanity. We always look at humanity first. So it always brings us back to the table, as well as food. It's always a unifying factor. So
I was the only one eating today, but it's all good.
bro, I ate at like 5:30, man.
Yeah, it's all good.
So keep having those conversations with non-Asian people. And then a second part, if you are Asian, and whether I'm talking to you, Sue, or just anybody else who's listening who is Asian, we have to empower ourselves. We have to educate ourselves, and we have to educate our children about this. James Baldwin said that if you don't know where you come from, you will never know where you're going to go. So we'll always be in this place of limbo where we don't know who we are, our identity, and we're going to consider. That's why we have so many self-hating Asian people in America. We have so many Asian people who say, "Oh, I don't want to speak my own language. I'm embarrassed because it got made fun of in high school." Or, "Yeah, you can call me by my English name, even though my real legal name is an Asian name." And it could be such a beautiful name that means God's essence or whatnot, but because they get made fun of here in America in school, they have to change their name to compromise and assimilate to the culture. No, our long-term battle is to be able to empower ourselves, because look, we can't change the size of our eyes. We can't change the color of our hair unless you bleach it or whatever. You can't change the color of your skin. So how I say it is, look, my skin is golden and I'm proud and outspoken. So I hope you can do the same thing for yourself. That is our long-term battle, and that's going to be a constant battle and a constant journey for us. So that is my long story short, a short-term and a long-term plan for Asian Americans. Hope that helped you, Sue.
That was compassionate and beautifully said, Rob.
Oh, thank you, brother. I love you. You're amazing.
So that ties in pretty well, I think, to something on my mind.
Mm.
So the United States, we're famous as this melting pot, this great melting pot. I mean, we are, if not the most diverse nation by like percentage, we're at least close to it, and like by at least nominal numbers, we have the highest diversity in the world of any country. So it makes me think like that is really cool. Like offhand, my first opinion is like that is super cool, and follow on is like that makes us stronger because then we're able to pull from all sorts of different cultural backgrounds and influences, as well as like heritages, information, like just the knowledge set. Like I can tell you, as well as anybody that spent time in the military can tell you, like there is power in diversity, and the military is like the most diverse company you can basically find in the United States. And it's wild just how often someone's different perspective can help create like a better, faster solution. All right. It happens like all the time. So I'm a big fan of diversity because I've seen like it applied to also to things that matter, and seen it in action. Right. So that's really cool. I'm not a fan, like quick side note, I'm not a fan of chasing diversity for diversity's sake.
Yep.
Like I think diversity hire is one of the worst ideas I've ever heard. But diversity does bring value. The objective is not diversity, but diversity is incredibly valuable. So anyway, lately though, with all this tension that's been around racial issues, it kind of feels a lot like our melting pot is becoming a little bit more like a tossed salad, right? And I guess I kind of want to poke your brains on like what's the benefits and the cons of that, because I can say because later. You go ahead, man.
When I was a kid, my teachers have told me that the United States is a cultural melting pot.
Yeah.
As I've gotten older, I realized that is not the case. And in fact, it has never been the case. And quite honestly, I like that it's not the case. We are not a cultural melting pot. And there's a famous teacher who mentioned this in an Oprah Winfrey talk show. She did the study of the blue eyes versus brown eyes case with her third grade class, and she said, "Oh, thank you, Sue. First, Sue, I totally get that sentiment. I have friends of my own who are Asian American who are still embarrassed to speak their own language, so much so that they have completely lost it. That they can't even communicate with their grandparents. So think about all that history and culture that's lost because of that communication difference. It sucks. But that is why we cannot look at the past and think, dang, I should have. What if? That's just going to build resentment, and that's just going to build regret. The only thing we could do now is to move on. So even if you're 40, 50 years old and you're like, dang, I completely forgot how to speak Thai, or I forgot how to speak Tagalog or Cantonese, hey, it's okay. It's never too late to start. And we got the internet now. Educate yourself. It's never too late to learn. But anyways, going back to what you're saying, I always feel like this is a tossed salad, and it should be a tossed salad. Because a melting pot means that you're putting all these ingredients together, and then some of these ingredients end up blending in. I can't even taste it anymore. A tossed salad still keeps all the ingredients the way it is, but it is shared together. You could taste all the different ingredients. I like it this way because I want to be able to celebrate your differences. There is strength in unity, but when I think of unity, I don't think of unity as same. Mm-hmm. Unity to me is a collective, is people coming together from different backgrounds. That is unity. So being able to see that, what true unity looks like, is seeing the differences and being able to celebrate that. So, hey, if one of my really good friends, he's Jewish American, hell yeah, I'm gonna celebrate that with you, man. You got your things. There's certain differences between me and you, and there's also certain similarities. I love the similarities that we have, and I'm also going to respect and also acknowledge the differences that we have, because that is uniquely you, and that is something that you should be proud of, 100%. Don't matter where you're from, you Black, Hispanic, white, Asian, and then within all that, all the different ethnic groups and different cultures in it, we have to celebrate that. So that's my personal opinion with it. But what do you think, GPS?
Yeah, I was about to say, I want to hear John Marco's thoughts here.
Yeah, I like the better use of the phrase of the toss salad, and I agree with your comparison to viewing it as opposed to a melting pot, because I do agree with how we should be viewing the various cultures that are within the United States. And when I was thinking back to the earlier conversations we were having, like there is a tremendous amount of respect and pride in knowing your culture, knowing where you're from, and passing on those values, the meals that you cooked growing up from, I have a lot of Peruvian Chinese fusion food that I love and everything. I want to share that with everyone. It's amazing. But like, if I bring it from, and just speaking plainly here, white European Americans were among the first that colonized America. So they were among one of the first immigrants, so to speak, that were here before the various parts from around the world came here. One can understand that, if they've always that, and it ties into that is what you see, and this also ties into the conversation about diversity in jobs. Like you are what you see, or you can't be. What's the phrase? Like you can't beat what you can't see, or something like that. And that was a big part of the conversation with Joe Biden's ticket and his cabinet nominees. Sure, there is an argument to make about qualifications, but there has to be a balancing act where, okay, yeah, these people are qualified, but it is also at the same time shows a proper representation of who we are as a country, which I think there is some merits to that. But when you look at, let's say you're a white American growing up various centuries throughout American history, you're used to your surroundings. Like you're used to seeing certain kinds of people around you. And I can see why they would feel like this is their home. But tying back to our conversation about, where are you from when you ask an Asian American versus where are you from when you ask a white person, that begins to be a bit of a problem. Like there has to be an acknowledgement that we are, and it ties back to the old saying, like we are all immigrants. You can't say that you were here before everyone else. Like you don't have claim as much as you do. You can't take the worst out of people trying to make a better life here and paint that as an excuse to not like someone. Like, no one comes from a different country that you don't like to destroy this country. Everyone comes here for the American dream that in an ideal world is still possible. And I hate to say that, especially over my lifetime, like it's become a darker and not a darker, but like a less and less feasibility for our generation, forthcoming generations. Like that's one of the reasons I work as hard as I can in civic engagement until like the next generation can see the potential that we can have. But there are a lot of problems that we need to have conversations about, be willing to have these conversations about first. Now, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but I definitely agree with, a tossed salad versus a melting pot. I mean, I can imagine it'd be hard to change the norms of using one phrase over the other, but yeah, you nailed it very well, Rob. Like, there are amazing differences that we all bring to the table in terms of our culture. And when Pierce was talking about the diversity of the army, like, there's a characteristic of that is that you are basically tied to work together for a common goal. And the question would be is how do we apply a common goal for the everyday American that isn't part of the military with their neighbors, so to speak?
Yeah.
Also, I'll add diversity is more than just race.
Yes.
I'm counting diversity for people from podunk little towns to big cities, from money, from no money, parents, no parents, right?
Disabilities.
All of that is diversity. It's not just race. I mean, actually, also that's also one of my biggest problems with diversity hires, because like there's so much about diversity that you're trying to just boil down to someone's like skin color, right? Like
There's a lot more
it seems
to that.
incredibly short-sighted to me.
Yeah.
Deaf
people, disabilities, people who use ASL, people who are blind, they're also part. That's diversity too.
Yeah, and in terms of like diversity and job hires, like I'm mostly one of those people in favors of like hey, let's not show someone's name or race or gender on their job application. Like let's take away all this stuff that shouldn't count towards their I don't say competency, but like how what's the qualifications and whether that person get the job done. Like because there's just by human nature there's going to be preconceived notions when you see a certain type of name or a certain type of last name or where someone's from. Like we have to put all that aside and think about the merits that this person can bring to the table. But again, I think there's also needs to be a bit of a balancing act too.
Yeah. I think this also depends on number one, what kind of business, and then what kind of industry that you're into. Because for example, if you are a black-owned business and your entire CEO all the way top down to bottom is African Americans and Black Americans, and if your mission is to promote, say, African American history, culture, then yeah, I would say there should be an emphasis on a certain group of people that depending on that group, or that business, for example.
Yeah. I'd expect a Nordic, history, museum or something to also probably like hire people
who are Nordic, right?
Like,
yeah. So that's an example of like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. It's also hard in terms of entertainment too. In the entertainment industry, in the acting world, that's also really tricky. It's because there's sometimes there are roles that are written that's all ethnicities, but then there are also roles that are specific to ethnicity too. So that part, so for me as an actor, like when I'm applying for different roles and even on my profile on different websites, I do put, Asian or East Asian or whatever option that they have. It's part of that because and it's not like, oh, they're profiling you, but it's a type, it's a cast, like, so then my agent or manager, like, oh, if they're looking at like roles that's like for Asians, like, oh, hey, we're looking for a 2-line role, they're looking for an Asian nurse, then they could pick from a whole plethora of Asian talent, for example.
Right.
So that's when I'll say that you would use it. But I'll say like for corporate America or just like most of the other businesses, I think it should be a little bit more general. But then there are exceptions, I would say. Yeah.
Back on the that note of like melting pot versus tossed salad. I mean, these are just like phrases, and of course, like they mean different things to other people. You know, you mentioned like how the tossed salad. You know, that way we're all able to keep our individual flavors, and the product is greater than the sum of its parts, right? Like that's a super cool analogy, and I resonate with it super strongly. In part because I love food, but like, no, for real though, like I love how I love being able to experience certain cultures the best I can in the United States of America. You know, you go to Chinatown or Little Italy or you name it, you know, I think it's awesome to still see those close familial bonds that are keeping a lot of their like, you know, parental culture and still also being American, you know, and it's really cool for me to see the mix of that, right? And then like I'm able to learn from it, right?
Yeah.
So I resonated very strongly with that statement. On the other hand, you know, like this just being, you know, made up analogies, of course a melting pot is going to create a stronger like metal, you know, an alloy is fundamentally going to be stronger, more resilient, more integral than a tossed salad, right? So for these made up analogies, you know, it's different things are different meanings, I guess. But
I mean, I just
feel
love
like
the fact that all of the analogies are food.
yeah, I mean, you know, melting pot could be cheese, right? It doesn't have to be metal.
Right.
Yeah. And in terms of like the melding aspect, like that's something I think about sometimes when I'm very, very liberal with my food experimentation. Just the other day, I had like those little tin cans of crackers and like the crumbs in the bottom were left over. So I just like tossed that on my pasta because why not? A cucumber steer salad, like, you know, I think about the fact that what if we get to a point that everything's are so melded that, you know, for example, me, fusion food is kind of a new thing contemporarily for Peruvian culture. Like Peruvians and native Peruvians have been there for centuries, and the huge influx of Asian Americans happened over the course of just the past few centuries. And fusion Asian Peruvian food is the bomb. It is absolutely freaking amazing. But one would ask, does that detract from the native history of Peru? Will it overlap it at some point? Will the diversity be so strong that you can't tell what the difference is at some point, at X point in the future? And, you know, cultures will change over time.
Yeah.
And
the potato is not from Europe, you know. The potato came in Central America, right? And you know, now we have the stereotype of Irish loving potatoes or Eastern Europe, like, you know,
so true.
Any Eastern European dish, like there's a good chance there's a potato in it, you know. Tomatoes, the same thing too. Like they're not from the Mediterranean; they're also from the Americas. So sorry to cut you off, John.
Yeah,
Marcus.
yeah.
Like,
No, it's just
a
thought.
Example of like new cultures totally incorporating something that was not part of their culture, and then like making it something that we strongly identify now as that culture.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, and there seems to be there seems to be such a concern with cultural identity with a lot of people these days that are tied into these, I don't want to say culture wars, but these tensions that how open are they to just the eventual change of their culture that they're a part of?
Definitely that. But what you mentioned, the example they gave of like Peruvian Chinese food is a great example of that, where it gets to a point where, say, like another group's influence has gotten really big, so it becomes part of the culture. And for example, like when we talk about, and another example is like New York City culture. Like, what is New York City culture when you have so many different people? Like,
right?
Oh, like for example, there's definitely heavy Italian culture, you know, or Irish culture, right? So as well as, you know, a lot of different cultures as well, but that all ends up becoming, you know, New York. Like, are we going to say that, like that that culture can't exist just because it's like new or something? But if it has that much influence in it, it should be acknowledged, you know. So it should be acknowledged that, oh yes, there is strong, like bagels. I love bagels. I just had one today. You know, I always get an everything bagel. You know, it's bacon, egg, and cheese and ketchup. It's so good. And yes, it has become now at this point very New York. It's very New York City. We can still, and we still acknowledge where it comes from too. We're like, yo, oh, there's Murray's Bagels here. There's this place, and you walk in there, and it's like there's still that sense of culture. The culture is still there, it's preserved, but it's also part of this New York culture too. And I think that's what's really brilliant.
Yeah.
I also don't want to leave Sue out of this because she has a direct question for our
right.
man Pierce.
Yeah, Pierce used to live in Korea. How did you feel about being an American in Korea? So first, I guess a minor correction. I didn't live in Korea, but I have spent time in Korea, and I did learn Korean in the United States military. So
안녕하세요.
I had, yeah, I shouldn't be. So I have, a more close perspective than your average American, I guess, right? So what was it still like being an American in Korea? I can still answer that. It's actually really, really wild. And it like, I don't even know where to start. So I certainly had like certain expectations in advance. And then there, how things actually played out. And as a whole, I was not fully expecting the complete polarity of reception that I would get. So as a whole, I want to say that the older Korean generation, as in the Korean generation that is born after the Korean War, all right? So these people would be roughly 50, 60 years old or whatever. They love Americans. They are like super kind to Americans. It's like if you're an American, you're just awesome to them. And that was like really welcoming and heartwarming to receive, like anywhere I went, anytime I interacted with someone from this generation. And I think that's largely because they feel gratitude to the United States military effectively saving, the country of South Korea and, not making it like North Korea. Now you remove that a generation or two, on the other hand, and then you have Koreans in like their 20s and whatnot. And Koreans in their 20s, they have a much more mixed attitude. So you have a lot of them that think that American presence is a good thing, and that it's a good thing that Americans intervened in the Korean War, that America is a good counterbalance to China and all the malicious acts that China is perpetuating and whatnot. And then you also have Koreans that think like, damn Americans, they shouldn't be here. This is our country. They're taking our woman. Like, I mean, like, it sounds almost cliche, but like it's an actual fear.
Yeah.
And it was really, really weird to experience like blatant racism from the group of people that are like, you are an American and you are not welcome here. You are not welcome at my establishment. I will not sell you food. I don't care how polite you are. I don't care that you speak Korean. You're a white Becking from America. I'm not going to give you shit. Get the fuck out of here before I, try to call the cops and claim that you hit me or something like that. I had to like, I diffused a couple conflicts in my time there as well, and you don't want to be the white guy because the police will just automatically take the Korean side of the story. And first off, like, there's a good chance that they don't speak sufficient English, so they might not even understand your side of the story. But even if they did, like, they're just, nah, fuck you. you're the white guy. You shouldn't even be here. Is frequently the attitude, and like they're gonna protect their own, right? And honestly, there's almost like some good reason for that, in the sense like there's a lot of American guys, a lot of American military guys that like when they're on base lib, they'll get drunk and they are going to just like break stuff and like create a big giant ruckus, right?
Like Itaewon, for example.
Yeah, and like that happens, and eventually you just get to the point of going like, nah, not doing it. Stay away, right? Like I don't even speak English anyway, right? So that can't happen. So I've experienced racism in Korea of like the, you are a, blank variety of people. I remember one time I went to this restaurant. So this is far from the only time that I had a racist experience, but this makes a kind of good story. I remember one time I went to this restaurant. And this restaurant, their gimmick was that they would set you up basically like on a blind date with someone else or whatever.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, that sounds pretty cool. I've never been to a place in like anywhere that does that or whatever. That sounds pretty cool. So like I walk in and I'm like, how you doing? Yeah, I speak Korean. It's all right if they don't speak English, or if they do, like that's awesome. And like if I'm waiting a while, that's cool. And if nobody even shows up or whatever, that's cool. I won't take it personally. But I think it's a really cool business that you're doing here, and I'd love to, have a conversation, pay for the meal of whoever you put in front of me, right? So I was with my friend as well, or I shouldn't say my friend, my brother. I was with my brother as well. So anyway, we get seated, and some time goes by, and I'm putting two and two together. I'm seeing like them matching other tables or whatever, and nobody's coming with us. I'm like, all right, they don't want to sit anybody with us. That's fine. Like it's not a big deal. It's why I came here, but it's not a big deal. Whatever. So anyway, eventually we just decided, all right, we're not gonna wait anymore. We'll order some food. So flag down the waiter, and I asked the waiter for some kimchi jjigae. Now, kimchi jjigae, for anybody that's not familiar, is traditionally rather spicy.
Yeah.
Which is great because I love spicy food. I know exactly what I was ordering. I was in the mood for some kimchi jjigae, so I was psyched for it. The dish that came out was not consumable. It was so spicy that even me, like this dude that loves spice, that would like have competitions with like some of my Korean friends there to be like, all right, who can, eat the most, you name it. Like I could not eat this. As a matter of fuck you pride, I ate it anyway, which I regretted the next day. All right. But anyway, I get to like a quarter of the bowl remaining. The waiter comes by and he's like, so how's the food? And this is in Korean. And I go like, yeah, it's just a little bit spicy, chon melta. All right. So I was like, it's just a little bit spicy. And he goes like, just a little bit, and I'm like, yeah, maybe you should throw in some more next time. And then I finished it in front of him. just as a bit of a fuck you. And this dude, like, I could see him shaking his head, like he did not understand how that happened, because he was totally trying to basically hospitalize me from this thing. I swear, because again, I want to emphasize, this was not fit for human consumption. I'm someone that loves spicy food, and I quote unquote could not eat this. Like I was sweating buckets later when I got out there. And this was in January. All right. It was like 8 degrees outside. Yeah. And I was just, as soon as we got outside, like I was just sweating. But all right, cool. So the waiter, decided to pull a prank on me. Whatever, my biggest part that miffed me about this incident though was when I went to pay. So I go up to the counter, decide to pay. It's a different waitress at the counter than the one that let us in. So anyway, I give her some money to pay for it, and I see her pocket a 5,000 won bill. All right, so basically $5. All right, I see her like take the change out of the teller. I see her put a $5 bill, or the Korean equivalent, in her pocket. All right, and then hand me the change. So immediately I go, what the fuck? I mean, a little bit more polite, in Korean. And she looked at me with like headlight, like she could not believe that apparently A, that I saw it, and B, that I'm calling her out on it in Korean. All right. Like she looked terrified from this. She had no expectation that this was going to happen. So she like glanced to the right, and this place had like kind of a bouncer, because it was kind of like I wouldn't say it was a club, but it was a trendier, establishment, definitely skewed younger guys, right? So they had basically a bouncer. And the bouncer came up, and like, it doesn't matter what I said, it doesn't matter how polite that I tried to be, the immediate answer was, you're getting out of here, right? He didn't speak English. Didn't need to. There's a lot of communication that can happen without words, right? So I'm trying to like explain, hey, you have a thief working for you, and it completely falling on deaf ears or whatever. And that incident, that soured my whole night. Like, not the food bit or whatever. I kind of thought that was funny because I got to, in my mind, show it up to the guy or whatever. And like other bits of racism hadn't, like, mostly had been like water off my back. But that one bit, the bit of the girl stealing money from me and then me trying to right that wrong and then just being completely forced out, ignored. They automatically take her side from it. That actually soured me for like the next like hour and a half to like 2 hours. Like I was super just miffed about it. Like it's difficult to say. Like it's a combination of like sadness and anger at the same time, and it was really like
Just a mental state you do not want to be in.
Yeah. So
I would have been pissed for the whole time. God damn.
Yeah. Well, so it's worth mentioning that like I grew up in a town that was 10% Caucasian, right? So I'm one of those white Americans that actually grew up as a minority, which is not that common. I know for a lot of people are surprised when I explain that, right? So this was not the first time that I had been on the like, hey, it's not cool to be white train. All right, far from it. Okay, and honestly, for the most part, like just it rolls off my back for the most part. Didn't bother me that much growing up. I mean, not much more than a lot of other things that growing up can be tough, right? But I just that one night though, there was just something about like the being, I guess, violated, even though it was only $5, and not even being given the opportunity to like try and make it right, not even for myself, but also for them, because like they're literally hiring a thief. That's seriously like it soured me for the next couple hours before I decided, you know what, I'm out on the town for having a good night. I'm gonna have a good night again.
Yeah.
It seriously soured me for a couple hours, dude.
Yeah.
It's not worth $5.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I eventually had to tell myself.
Damn. I'm
but
sorry
yeah,
you had to
dude.
go through that, brother.
Yeah, at the same time though, like again, Korea, like so many Koreans were ridiculously nice to me. There were so many places I went to where I could tell like I was getting out of the way great service because I was a white American. All right, like you experience the highs of like, hey, congrats for being white, as well as the lows for like, hey, you didn't win because you're white. The polarity like that was not something I've experienced in anywhere else I've been. Not in the United States, not in Germany, not in Puerto Rico, not like anywhere else that I have been in the entire world. India, I have not experienced the same just polarity in like the same place. It could be like the same day, you're a king or you're trash, and like that was really surreal for me to experience. Keep in mind my experiences are a bit different because I'm going out and like I'm not just sticking to the white people areas,
The
but,
expat
like,
areas.
the expat areas. That's a better way to put it.
Yeah.
But it was
I mean,
it was
I definitely think a lot of that
experience.
has to do with, as you mentioned, the Korean War and the American influence that America specifically had on Korea compared to like other countries. I think that definitely played a role. Same thing with people from Okinawa too.
My brother fortunately had what did he have? I think he had japchae, if I remember correctly, which is not spicy. So he was good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be upset the whole day too, Sue. I feel you. But that's why Pierce is a gentleman and a scholar, because he would just be like, all right, man, I'm pissed for a few hours, but you know what? I'm Pierce.
Yeah, Pierce is a good storyteller.
Oh, thanks, guys. I've got other stories of Korean racism. I guess.
Oh, yo, Pierce, you know what's crazy?
What's
Pierce?
up?
I am actually now an online English tutor to Korean students.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good on you, man. That's
ESL?
cool.
Huh?
ESL?
No, it's just it's not like ESL because it's for a Korean company. So it's like a Korean startup, and they mainly just want to match like native like Koreans who want to learn English with native speakers, because it's not just about, oh, hey, like these are the grammar terms. It's more so like, hey, we need to get them used to speaking, with natives, especially those who want to like come to America or the UK. So I'm doing that, and it's actually been really cool. And a lot of them are actually very open to like Western culture and Americans, and a lot of them, they want to come here. So yeah. How'd you talk?
So Killer Kim, I'm interpreting this question as being asked to me. How would you talk to older Asian gen who are like single issue conservatives? So I didn't interact with how do I put this? I didn't go into like in-depth conversations with older generation Koreans in Korean like very often. So my Korean is very difficult to hold a higher level conversation like that for a long time. That would be mentally exhausting for me. So generally speaking, would have those conversations if their English was also very good, or if I was honestly just having those conversations like as part of my education, which wasn't limited to Korea, but would also be stateside. The United States military has a language training school called Defense Language Institute, which is where I went to. And like all the cadre are native speakers from whatever country it is of the language that they're teaching, right? So we like you're there sun up to sun down, learning the language with them. You get pretty close with them, and you're able to get a wide variety of any opinion that they have, whether it's on food or politics. Like when you spend that much time with them, you're gonna get it, right? So I would say yes, a lot of them lean to conservative, but far from it. Like I met, well, I can skip that story, but far from it. And I wouldn't call most of them to be single issue. Like most Americans, I find that everybody has a lot of nuance. To a lot of people, like there might be a most important issue that they're not willing to compromise on.
John Marco.
Yeah, all right. See you, John Marco. Hopefully he comes back. Maybe it was just a connection issue.
Killer Kim,
yeah.
I believe you're actually talking about Asian Americans. That's what I'm assuming you're talking about, because you're talking about those who are pro-Trump. So I'm going to address you on the Asian American side of it. Yo, this is a serious issue because it's not just for Asian. It's not. I wouldn't say.
You were right.
Nah, it's all good, man. So, Killer Kim, this is a problem that we have here, and it's not even a problem that's within the Asian community. Honestly, this is for any type of person that's just a single issue type of person, regardless if you're liberal or conservative. Anybody who just goes for a single issue type of person is going to be very hard to convince them otherwise, unless you hit them at that issue. So that is something that, at least amongst the Yang Gang, and or like when we're like campaigning in Iowa, like I know Pierce and John Marco, you probably have experienced like certain people when you're door knocking who are very single issued about certain topics, and you will have to maneuver very gently with this, and you're gonna have to kind of play in their ballpark sometimes. So in your case with the example, like, okay, they're against China, so they're pro-Trump. There are a lot of Vietnamese Americans, for example, who are pro-Trump because they're very anti-China. So this is a great example of this. How would you go about to talk to older Asian generation who are single issue about this? Oh, man, I'm trying to find an answer for that as well, because that is hard. That's a very hard one, because that is something that's you could talk about race, you could talk about the economy, you could talk about what Joe Biden's trying to do with the vaccines and whatnot and to get rid of COVID. They don't care, because it's mainly like, is Joe Biden going to say fuck you China? Because if not, I'm going to go back with Trump, because I like the fact that he said fuck you China. I've had these conversations with some of these people online where I'm like, bro, like, it's racist to call it the China virus. And I get some person who's like, oh, well, I'm Asian, I don't think it's racist. And I'm like, bro, you definitely just voted for Trump just because like you don't like China for that reason. They are willing to see our people die and get attacked for their own political beliefs. Personally, I don't even bother with them. I don't even bother with those types of people just yet. It's more important for me to be able to mobilize my troops, to be able to convince the people who are the 80% instead of that 10% that's all the way to the extreme. Those are just 10%. There's 80% of the people who are still swaying one way or another, and those are the people who we need to talk to. Those are the people who we need to say, hey, these are some good policies from, I don't know, Andrew Yang, for example, or hey, like, you should check out this person, or you should think about it this way. You're more likely to convince them. And then over time, once you get enough people and momentum for it, maybe some of those people from that small 10% will start trickling over. But
Yeah.
if I were to just focus on them, you're going to have such a hard time, bro. And you're gonna get white hairs by the time you're like 30. So I'm just gonna be straight up with you, man.
Yeah, just on a strategy perspective, you want to target those they can probably convince. Like we had that issue when I was in Reno. Like we had some people that really wanted to talk to Trump voters because it's fun as a Yang supporter. But I'm like, yeah, but you're better off talking to 10% of that amount of Democrat voters are likely going to caucus in a Democratic Party. But going back to the original question, like from my experience, a big thing was just government involvement in business. Like, you know, conservatives and Republicans are mostly hands off, more free market. And a lot of Asian Americans are very about that. So it just comes to a matter of framing, okay, business is your thing. How are the policies that I support that just happen not be Trump sided or conservative sided is also pro business and beneficial for you? Like with Andrew, it's very easy. Hey, what's the best thing for business when everyone has money to spend? So it's just a matter of framing it in ways that they understand it and want to view things, because it's very easy to be like, you know, black and white about issues. Like, oh, if you're not free market, you're anti-market or whatever. Like, no, we can be free market and, you know, you know, also just want to stimulate that in various other ways. We have different approaches to it, but one of the bigger problems is that it's a very black and white viewpoint for a lot of people. And, you know, one of the more underlying causes, and as many people know, I'm more of a person that wants to take proactive approaches to problems, to solving things. Like, you know, a good news day is when there's no news. But when you look at the fact that a lot of people don't have the luxury to do this kind of research, like they're only, outside of just surviving, their only source of information is maybe the news they hear on the radio on their commute to or from work, or like in their 1 hour of possible spare time they may have after a long day of work. Like they don't have the literal like mental resources to do this kind of research. And as many of people here know, like I'm a huge proponent of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as in terms of using it as a metric. Like I posted today about Stockton's universal basic income pilot program, and how, you know, it decreased depression for those that had it. They use it on necessities, all the things that you would want your basic needs taken care of. And once you really get out of that mindset of scarcity and worrying about just living paycheck to paycheck, you can actually participate more in your society. So, you know, it's right now has to be a combination of admittedly both reactive and proactive issues, especially when it comes to the pandemic and the financial crisis. And there needs to be a very strong stimulus to counteract it, for us to have a proper what was the phrase that Adam Christensen said on Twitter? The great recovery, I believe it was, which I think was awesome. But at the same time, like, you know, we can't just get through this crisis we're going through and wonder like, okay, well, we're through it. It won't happen again until it does happen again. And you know, it's you know, talking about tackling a problem before it's a problem isn't sexy, unfortunately. Like the news media isn't built upon that. And well, at the same time, their bottom line is the dollar and not a human value and what they're doing to your society. It's going to be a big problem. Like I do give credit to Trump. Like he did call out the media, and I agree with him. The media has been causing a lot of problems, no matter what side of you're on. And people sometimes give me flack for giving Trump credit where credit is due, but that's what you're supposed to do with credit, man. Like if he did some great diplomatic things like that, I think are positive and newsworthy, yeah, then he did right. Like I'm not gonna help solve the problem with our divide by just being black and white about whether I like a elected official or not. And the same goes with Biden. I'm very critical about Biden. I'm very disappointed in his response to the pandemic so far. Like I'm not gonna hold someone to a different standard because I supported him. No. That's beyond the case. If anything, I'm more critical of him than I was of Trump, because, you know, I did this. My vote did this, so I'm kind of responsible for this.
I will say, Killer Kim. Well, first, I take back what I said earlier. Listen to John Marco on this one. His advice was way more articulate and way more effective than what I said. So yes, go with what he said. Very eloquent.
Yeah.
Also, Killer Kim, also understand that this is not just amongst Asian people too. You know, there's other demographics who are also single issued, who are pro Trump for similar reasons like that as well. Hispanic Americans, same thing. So, and other groups of communities as well. So, single issue. I hate single issue people, but how John Marco said it was just bread and butter. It was just smooth. He said it in the way that was so reminiscent of Andrew Yang's.
Yeah, man, it's
I
all
left my
about
right
just
forward.
normalizing conversations with people you disagree with. Honestly, Ro Khanna, a representative from California in the Silicon Valley area, actually went on Ben Shapiro's show recently, having a very respectful debate about the minimum wage. The people on the left can have their opinions about Ben Shapiro, but I mean, to his credit, he appreciated Ro Khanna for coming on and showing, hey, thank you for coming on, man. Like,
Yeah.
we have different opinions, but I appreciate you wanting to have a sit down conversation with me, the same way you did it with Andrew a year and change ago. But yeah, where did I post that? It's on Business Insider. I posted it on my Twitter. But it's recent news. If you just search Stockton Basic Income Program, you'll see the news results about the recent case studies of it. But yeah, man, in terms of humanitarian perspective, like, why wouldn't you want to cancel poverty? That's the one slogan for Humanity Forward I still ride with. Like, yeah, we have the resources. No one should be living with fear that if they're going to survive the next day or not. And then the housing problem in California is a huge humanitarian problem. There's videos of people towing cars because they didn't have license plates, but those are the only home that they have left after evicted from their houses. Like, how can you as a human being, as I understand, as an officer of the law, you are following orders and abiding by procedures that have been established. I understand that. But as a human being, how could you just do that and be okay with what you're doing? Like, if you're just following the rules and just letting that happen, then there are bigger problems that you have to be asking yourself about. And in some ways, you participating, you're enabling it. And again, that might be a different conversation. There's various rabbit holes. Sure, a police officer is doing his duty. He or she needs an income as well. I get that, but it ties into just bigger interchangeable problems that we have in our society. My Twitter is my handle right here at GPS official.
Also, Killer Kim, I know what you mean, that it's really hard to reach the older Asian relatives. And I had so many arguments, even with my mom, about, even outside of politics, race, economy, everything. And the moments that never worked was when I got heated, or when she got heated. Every time one of us got heated, it just went downhill from there. And it just caused our relationship to just get worse and worse and worse. The only way that it got better was just through love. So GPS was able to speak very eloquently about practical methods. I don't really have a practical method except for the more philosophical approach, which is like, when it comes to like older Asian relatives, a lot of them are going to be stubborn. A lot of them they think that what their perspective is right. And they're going to look at someone like you who's a little bit younger, and they're going to say, hey, you got to be the one listening to me because I have more experience than you. So the only way that you could get them to like lower their guard down in some situations is to show them love in the way that they can appreciate, For example, it's like, you know how it is, man. If you're Asian, you never say I love you to your parents because your parents never say I love you to you. But you know what we do say? We say, have you eaten? Have you eaten is the equivalent of I love you. So certain things like that. It's like, hey, mom, have you eaten? Or whatever that lingo may be for your community or for your culture, or that's specific for your family. You show that familial love first. They'll be a little bit more open to sit down and talk to you. And then you bring in John Marco's amazing points, and boom, they're on your side.
Man, hopefully. Have you eaten, man? That just rung true, man. Like I as a third Asian, I felt that in a lot of ways growing up. But yeah, man, my when you're Asian and Hispanic, man, especially rice, more than anything, rice is basically your blood type.
Rice is a blood type.
It was very hard when I first did my keto diet, just giving up carbs completely.
Oh, but what?
Yeah, it's doable, man. Once you get past the 10, 14 days, you can do it. I told people the first 10 to 14 days, the 10th to 14 days is the hardest of keto. I've done it a few times. But once you get past that, it's smooth sailing. But yeah, what I tell people, especially nowadays with the divide that there is, I tell people you would be fascinated what happens when you bring an olive branch to what both people thought was easily going to be a gunfight. Like my parents can talk about all these Trump supporters at work. Man, I want to buy them a drink right after they get off and just talk to them. Like, let's just do that. Like, I'm more than happy to talk to any Trump supporter, anyone has an opposing viewpoint than me, and just sit down and talk. Because, as with the saying, like, if it's kind of tied to like, if you're in a room that all sounds the same or whatever, like go to a different room. Like, you learn more by not being an echo chamber of confirmation bias. Like, you need different perspectives. Like, everything needs to be be critically judged no matter what side of the aisle you're on or whatever. Like, no, I want criticism, please.
Just last month, we had my friend Zach Wilson on the show. He's a Republican that currently supports Trump. Despite all the things that Trump has done, he currently supports Trump. You know who he also supports? Andrew Yang. He supports them both. And he's far from the only Republican that I know that actively supports both of those individuals, right?
That was an awesome conversation.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. Yeah. What was I going to say on that? Oh, yeah. So, like, he's far from the only one that I know. And John Marco's point is entirely right. That happened. I mean, it didn't happen, like, immediately, but Zach has been a friend of mine for a while now. And numerous times we'd talk about politics. And, you know, I would explain, you know, yeah, this is my point of view for this or for that or whatever. And by doing so politely, by not attacking him like virtually anybody else had that he had talked politics with, you know, he was far more willing to actually listen to what I was saying. Who would have thought? And it turns out that a good idea can be a good idea regardless of where it comes from, and some people are able to recognize that. So in his mind, he's going, oh wait, this idea is coming from Andrew Yang. All right, you know what, I think I like that guy after all, right?
Yeah, I have this recurring thought that comes to mind frequently, especially when I'm just doom scrolling on Twitter. And I make this observation mostly coming from the left side of things, because my view is a little skewed left, and I follow mostly left people. It isn't to say I don't follow a lot of right people, but sometimes I just see Twitter, I'm just like, you know, it seems like the left is behaving as if everyone on the right doesn't vote.
I'm gonna try to remember that quote. Yeah, it's good.
Far from the truth.
Oh gosh, it's just frustrating, man.
Yeah. No, but yeah, that love at the end of the day. I mean, think about it this way, like that's how the three of us got involved with the Yang Gang too, and with Andrew Yang's campaign. Like, he was able to pull people from all walks of life because he was approaching it humanity first, instead of just saying, oh, hey, I am right, you're wrong, you're ignorant, you suck. He said, okay, well, he's bringing a lot of different points, and he's showing compassion. And when you have compassion, you're able to translate a lot of these ideas across. Even if you have a good idea, if you're approaching it aggressively, they don't even want to listen to you. So always approach it with love, especially with your elders.
Yeah, and that's something I brought up in the previous episode with Pierce, is just like, how do people that are part of movements that want to build a better world for everyone, so to speak, reconcile the fact that everyone includes people they strongly disagree with? How are you not going to involve them in the process in which you're trying to build one? Like that, you have to be able to reconcile that.
You have to have different groups of people together, and that is that tossed salad. That is that unity. It's like, yes, you are different. You very much differ from me politically, but I want to break bread with you. I want to hang out with you. I want to get to know your family. I want to know what you like.
I want to know your food, specifically your food.
Yeah. Yeah.
Real talk.
Real talk. Boom.
Like you blow my mind, I'll blow your mind.
Food porn.
Yeah, man. There's sometimes when people tell me they haven't tried this dish before, I'm like, I am so envious of you. Like, this is the first time you're gonna experience this, man. Fuck you.
Yeah, I have. So I met a friend of one of my friends for the first time over like December, and he had just eaten potatoes for the first time like a month earlier. Like, I'm not joking, because he was from India and whatnot, and just like they never ate potatoes or whatever. Yeah. So now he's like, I love potatoes. He's like, potatoes and cheese, potatoes and sour cream.
Yeah. Speaking of that, like, I kind of want to meet someone that's never had melted cheese before, or just cheese in general.
Yeah.
Like, I want to go on that adventure with them.
I love that. It's the equivalent of like seeing snow for the first time. What?
Oh.
I want to have that wonderment again. It's nice.
I remember one time I had some family friends visit years ago in Miami, and they're from Peru. And in Peru, it doesn't rain just because like climate of everything. It like maybe rains an inch a year, if at all.
Oh, wow.
So when it rains in Peru, it's like news of the town, essentially. So we're leaving a theater one day, and we're going back to the car, and I notice that they're not next to me anymore. And I turn around, they're like 20 yards away, just awestruck, staring at the sky with their phones out, taking photos and videos of the thunderstorm.
Whoa.
And I was just like, oh wow, I can't
Pretty cool.
imagine seeing this for the first time. And you're like, they're just in like as awe as a human can be, and it was just awesome.
Damn, yo. I mean, if I've never seen a thunderstorm, and I saw that shit coming
You'd
at
be
me right
tripping.
there, I'd be tripping, man. Yo, it makes sounds. Like, it's bright as fuck, and it just scares me sometimes. What? Oh, that's right. You haven't really seen snowfall yet? Hey, bro, Killer Kim, when you see snow for the first time, man, take it all in, man.
Yeah, man.
It's
Just
beautiful.
in 3.5 years, come to Iowa with us again.
Do it.
Yeah, you get some snow there. I remember driving with you in the car, John Marco. We're pulling up on this house, and you can't even see it because there was so much snow.
Iowa snow was oof. Oh
Yeah,
man.
one thing I learned within the first week is that like I was like with Jason, I think, and like we'd go by the houses on the list, and he like, no, we're not going to this one. We're passing it. And I'm like, yeah, we have to go to that one. And then I realized the term of snowbirds, and I'm like, okay, yeah, but well, there is if there is maybe 10 feet of snow in their driveway and it's not shoveled, they're probably in another state or in another latitude.
Yep.
Snowbirds, yeah.
So
Also,
Sue, to answer your question, a month or so ago, we changed to 7 p.m. Eastern time
Yeah.
Mhm.
at John Marco's request. So that's
Yeah.
where we'll be, or what time we'll be starting next week.
It works way better for me too because I wake up early to teach now. So
Nice, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, so these two guys can be like responsible or something.
Yeah, and like
Right.
going back on topic is just like just being good people. When I was tweeting the other day, like just normalize just like giving random compliments to people. Like it's honestly, one time I was driving around during David Kim's campaign, and I was at a red light, and I look up next to me, and there's this guy like a bus stop, sitting thing where you sit for a bus stop. So someone was just sitting there. And he had this like really cool, just rad styled pants. It was just like super various colors, and it was just really popping out. And he just lowered my window. I'm like, dude, fucking awesome pants, man. He's like, thanks, man. And he just drove away. And I'm like, I mean, I wanted to show my appreciation for how awesome that looked, but I'm like, for all I know, that could have been the best thing. Could have turned his day around. And people have told me that before, like just a little gesture like that I've done to people. Like, you know what, when you did that, like that really like made my day. And I'm like, ah,
Yeah.
dude, it's good to know.
I say especially nowadays, when we're in a global pandemic and everybody has different internal struggles and demons that we're going through, a single compliment, a single act of kindness or care goes miles and miles. So it really can make that difference.
Yeah,
Pay it
man.
forward.
I just want to live in a world where everyone is everyone's hype man. That's like the ideal end goal.
I love that.
Rob, your voice is so sexy.
Hey, Pierce, man. Like I said, you're a gentleman and a scholar. You always have been and you always will be.
Ah, shucks, thanks.
I love you.
I love you too, boo.
Yeah.
So, on this latest notes of flirtation aside, I think we've been going for a couple hours. I'm good to call it an evening with you, kind gentlemen and ladies in the audience. It's been a good time. See you
Thank
guys
you,
next
Fam
week.
Bam, for tuning in.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for witnessing our bromance towards the end. Thank you guys.
Be well.
See you
All
guys
right.
next time.
Everyone, be nice to each other.
Yeah.